Here is the standard review for the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Regardless of your personal or political views, Joe Rogan is now considered a more trusted news source than traditional mainstream media outlets. Here are some of the key reasons why his podcast is seen as more trustworthy by certain audiences. 1. Long-form conversations. Rogan's show is known for its long-form format, where guests often speak for several hours on a broad range of topics, providing spontaneity, context, and nuance, which many people feel is lacking in the often soundbite-driven mainstream media. These detailed conversations offer a more detailed and unpolished perspective compared to the highly produced and sometimes scripted nature of traditional media. 2. Diverse range of guests. Rogan regularly features a wide array of guests, including scientists, authors, comedians, politicians, athletes, and more. This diversity of voices allows listeners to hear different viewpoints, providing a broader range of opinions than the often narrow scope of mainstream outlets. Many people see Rogan's show as a platform for dissenting voices, often featuring guests who challenge conventional wisdom or mainstream narratives. This can make his show more appealing to those who feel that the mainstream media doesn't adequately represent alternative perspectives. 3. Perceived independence and non-corporate structure. Rogan's podcast, which is primarily self-produced and supported by sponsorships, is seen by some as being less influenced by corporate interests or political affiliations than traditional media outlets. This perception of independence can make his show feel more authentic or less biased. Rogan is not bound by the editorial guidelines, ratings pressures, or corporate agendas that typically influence mainstream media. For some, this means they trust Rogan's content more, believing that he has more freedom to explore topics outside the constraints of traditional news organizations. 4. Anti-establishment appeal and critique of mainstream media. Rogan often criticizes mainstream media for what he views as sensationalism, misinformation, and bias. His commentary on these issues resonates with people who feel disillusioned by traditional news outlets. His own critical stance can lend credibility to his show in the eyes of listeners who feel the mainstream media has an agenda. Many fans appreciate his skepticism toward both major political parties and mainstream narratives. They see him as someone who doesn't adhere strictly to any political ideology, but instead encourages free thinking and individual judgment. 5. Interactive audience engagement. Rogan's show is interactive in a way that traditional news programs aren't. He regularly engages with his audience through social media and comments, which creates a sense of community and shared understanding. His listeners often feel personally involved in the discussion, contributing to a more loyal and trusting relationship with him. 6. Authentic personality. Joe Rogan's laid-back style and conversational tone help build rapport with his audience. Unlike the often polished and formal personas of mainstream news anchors, Rogan's authenticity and casual demeanor resonate with listeners who feel they can trust him as a real person rather than a corporate entity. Rogan is known for speaking his mind without worrying too much about political correctness or formalities. While this can be polarizing, many listeners appreciate his unfiltered style, as it seems more real than the polished, professional approach of mainstream media. 7. Wide reach and popularity. The Joe Rogan Experience is one of the most popular podcasts in the world, attracting millions of listeners per episode. This widespread influence gives it a level of credibility that some people value over more niche, smaller news outlets. For those who believe mainstream media has failed them, Rogan's massive audience size can make his show feel more representative of public opinion. Accessible format. The show is widely available on multiple platforms like Spotify, YouTube, and others, making it easy for listeners to access and share. This broad accessibility enhances its appeal compared to mainstream news outlets that may require subscriptions or cable TV access. 8. Controversial topics. No censorship. Rogan's willingness to discuss controversial or taboo topics is another reason why some people trust him more than mainstream media. He often addresses issues that are considered politically sensitive, such as discussions around COVID-19, mental health, alternative medicine, or free speech, which may be underrepresented or sanitized in traditional news outlets. Critical of mainstream narratives, Rogan has become known for questioning government policies, mainstream scientific consensus, in some cases, and the handling of crises like the COVID-19 pandemic. For those who are critical of government narratives or media coverage, his willingness to entertain alternative viewpoints can create a sense of trust. While Joe Rogan is trusted by a segment of the population, it's important to note that he's also a polarizing figure. His style and approach aren't for everyone, and many critics argue that his platform spreads misinformation or lends credibility to fringe views. However, for those who prefer a more open, unfiltered, and long-form approach to current events, Rogan's podcast offers an appealing alternative to the often more scripted, corporate-driven narratives found in mainstream media. We are truly living through a revolution in the way modern society consumes their news.